Scott Dochterman. Chad Leistikow. Together on one pod, talking odds and all things Big Ten. Powered by GameDay Men's Health, with locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, and North Liberty. From the Channel Seed Studios, this is Legends and Listeners. Exclusively on Iowa Everywhere.
Hey, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowans everywhere. Episode 54 of Legends and Listeners could be a pretty interesting one here on the Iowa Everywhere Network because quarterback panic is already upon us, Scott. Is it panic? Is it overreaction? Is it what we always see on Kids Day, and we just need something to talk about in the evil media? I am Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register, joined by the Athletic Scott Dochterman. We are coming to you live from the Channel Seed Studios. Been a while since we've done a live show. Scott had to do a few recordings this summer, but we are both back in the groove. I'm back in the USA, and I was treated to some quarterback play, Scott. So here's what we'll do. We'll Tim Lester says he's going to use a script. So we decided before the show, let's script our show today. And we only really have one play in our script. So we're going to talk. I'm going to send a call on the headset here, Scott, and we'll see if we get to anything else. So here's the question. How bad was it for Cade McNamara, and how much concern do you have?
Wow. If I'm going to go with the Shanahan-esque, that's 15 words. And I got to try to remember all of them. And in this day and age, it's really struggling. But let's pare this down to I write 34 dive on one. I would say very, very concerning. And I'm not being hyperbolic. I try not to be when it comes to quarterbacks or a lot of things when it comes to Iowa football. I'm usually pretty measured in how my critiques go. Sometimes I'll get a little bit excited, but everybody else does too. But in this case, I didn't see one redeeming thing that happened for him on Saturday. Maybe that he got the snaps. I mean, because, you and I charted the passes. 8 of 24 is not a good day, even against an elite defense. There were overthrows. There were underthrows. There's a pick six. There was but I was even more concerned in some of the drills and the not even the 7-on-7, but just the actual drills that I saw where he was late on receivers, he was behind receivers. It really reminded me a lot of Jake Christensen. I hate to say it, but that's kind of where I thought. And now, Chad, I'll kick it to you here after going just to give it a little bit of a buffer here, and that is. Okay, was that because he's rusty? He really hasn't played a whole lot. He hasn't been healthy for a whole long time. Even going back to Kids Day last year where he had the quad injury and then he had the ACL, and he's trying to get that timing down, and especially an 11-on-11 environment. And he's also learning a new offense. So maybe there is some overthinking. Maybe there is some struggles with that. But that said, Chad, if I'm grading this, it's a failing grade is what I saw on Saturday. And it kind of mirrors to the whispers I'd been hearing out of camp thus far.
Yeah, that was, it was concerning for sure, because, to me, this is, besides the Tim Lester offense, this is storyline A for the Iowa season. Like, okay, how, everything we can kind of blame on Deacon Hill last year in a way. You can excuse the season away. Like, okay, well, they should have recruited better at quarterback, whatever. Should have developed better at quarterback. Should have had Joe Labus ready, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, terrible hand they were dealt. Deacon Hill, he just sucked, and Cade's back, so everything's going to be better now, right? And you wanted to just see that. And even I would say going back to Cade's summer comments where he said, I've still got it. You felt pretty pretty optimistic that, he would at least be what they need, which is somebody who can make the trains run on time, as you say. You and Mark used to say. And, convert those third and shorts. And that was like one of the most concerning parts for me, Scott, was like Kirk puts them in the situations sometimes, and sometimes they naturally occur too. But when he was running a lot of those third and shorts, he wasn't converting them. I mean, there was one blitz, I believe it was Kyler Fisher that came off the edge, where he had Caden Weechin on a hot read, wide open. It was a good read. He made the right read, threw the ball where he couldn't even catch it. I mean, it's a 4-yard route? I mean, not a long route. It wasn't even close. You couldn't even make an acrobatic catch for the first down. And so that's the kind of stuff that's like, oh gosh, this season's here in 3 weeks. Don't like that. Game week is here in 2 weeks. We're going to be talking to Ferentz and everyone else 2 weeks from today. On game week. So there's not a lot of time here, Scott. And that's where I go next and I think you asked the question. Like, you actually asked two really good questions. One, was this indicative of camp so far? Ferentz said yes.
Yes.
It was a bad day. I thought that was a really great way to phrase the question. It wasn't like, hey, Cade struggled today.
Yeah.
Like, was this indicative? Yes, it was. That's eye-opening. And two, will you give – how many one reps does Brendan Sullivan now need, who didn't light the world on fire either, Scott? But that's where I go. I would say, I don't know, where would you say? I would say this week, I would hope they're at least going half and half this week, but that's a tough decision to make too. So I don't know. What do you think?
I think they have to. And here's a couple of reasons why. And number one is, you owe it to everybody in that organization. I mean, this is $100 million operation. You owe it to them, not to either one of the quarterbacks. I mean, Cade McNamara came in with more equity than he has now. He came in as, well, he led Michigan to a national title. Maybe he didn't have the talent of J.J. McCarthy, but he's capable of being the guy for Iowa. And then last year didn't, for all the injuries, and you just kind of say, okay, that's terrible. He didn't play well early in the year, but there's a lot of factors there. But you cannot have this going forward because of all the other reasons, which is, I think they're pretty set in just about every other area myself. Maybe wide receiver, you have some questions, but the rest of the areas I was very impressed with. Secondly, you have a new offensive coordinator, and he deserves the right to be able to coach that offense to success. And as he told you in a one-on-one interview, as he told me and everybody else on the side the other day, is that he had, he wants to cut all those things in half, whether it's go from the 130 millionth offense to 65th or whatever. He wants to cut all those in half. And you can't do that with this quarterback. It just isn't going to work because you're going to face the same issues you will as you get through the season. So I think Brendan Sullivan, while he didn't light the world on fire, he was 10 of 21 for 76 yards, Chad. And we charted that. He missed on some passes, no question, but he also had a couple of drops, not his fault. But what impressed me probably the most was when they got into 2 minute, he was 5 of 6. He went right down the field. He completed the passes he needed to complete. And you owe it to the team first. Last period, as your old colleague Randy Peterson said, put a 30 on it and slap it on. That's what you need to do, is owe it to the team to see who's the best guy for this job. And if it's Brendan Sullivan, he came in June. He's learning this as he's going, which means that his trajectory is at a higher level right now. It's got a quicker pace. So I think you owe it to the team. Now, Cade very well could have a great week ahead. Yeah. He could bounce back. He could see what he's doing. Maybe it's his footwork. Maybe he's trying to do too much and just relax. Let the game come to you. You do the right things, and maybe the accuracy will come, and his familiarity will come, and everything will be fine. That's okay too. I'm not advocating for either one. I don't care. But I think Iowa deserves the best quarterback it possibly can. And if that's Brendan Sullivan, then you start him and you don't look back. You let it go that way and make sure it's organic, because if you've got the right guy, even if he's a game manager, this team is capable of going to the playoff.
Yeah. So here's the question I want to pose to you, because we were at Kids Day in 2015 together when CJ Beathard looked horrendous, and it wasn't his fault. He was getting sacked, sacked by Drew Ott like every second play.
Right.
But so I've heard that. I wrote that too. I was like, that team went 12-0, and it just looked terrible on Kids Day. This was coming off the 14th season where people were already on edge. So we've gone through this before. And Scott, I also want to, be fair to Cade here. And if we flip the roles, if we put Brendan Sullivan in the ones all day and going against Jay Higgins and Y.A. Black and Jamari Harris and, Quinn Schulte, all the, Sebastian Castro, all the ones on D, if he was doing that all day and Cade was running the twos, would we have thought differently about this? I'm genuinely curious what you think.
It's possible. I think what the differences I saw were with Cade, it was accuracy and timing and almost consistency and confidence out of that, which is the makeables. Not all of them. I mean, this is a great defense you're going against, by the way, one of the best in the country. So it's not going to come easy, but there were makeables that he did not make, that Brendan Sullivan did make. Makeable passes. Sullivan was on target when there were open receivers. Cade was not. Those are the concerns I have. Not that he's going against 8 NFL guys, which he is. I mean, that's a unit that's going to kick the shit out of everybody. I mean, kick a lot of poop out of people for a long time, this year. But my apologies to anybody. But that I think this is the one thing is, though, when you talk about Kids Days of the past, and they're a horror show for the offense. Yeah. And the worst one by far, it's like the one that I'm like, I'll never see anything this bad again, was 08, when you had King and Kroll and Ballard and Claiborne and Angerer and all these just amazing defenders.
Well, and there's Christensen again.
Yep, there was Christensen and Stanzi, and they weren't very good. And it was obvious, but also Sean Green couldn't get more than, if he got 5 yards in that scrimmage, I'd have been shocked. By the end of the year, that running game was as good as there was in the country, and he was the Doak Walker Award winner. And quarterback was still very, very inconsistent with Stanzi that year, but they won games towards the end. But I think the threshold is higher here, Chad. I think this team has a higher ability, higher ceiling than that team did. That team grew into a good team. And then the next year it took that next step. Well, this is the next step year. And you've got to make sure that you are running, lack of cliches, on all cylinders, not week one, certainly by week 2, because you're going against a very formidable opponent, in my opinion, in Iowa State. So I think that's why I'm concerned. I think Cade could turn it around, but thinking it and doing it are two different things.
Yeah, urgency is where it seems like your message is at, and I agree. I mean, you can't wait around for this. It's not like you're expecting to go 6-6. It's not a rebuilding year. This is the year, because everybody came back for this, just like you said, and so it's a very fascinating conversation. I think the one thing that I don't want to say gives me hope, but gives me that I notice is different maybe than the past is several times over the weekend, Ferentz was given the opportunity to name Cade as his starter, and he did not. He's on the field, clearly he was taking the 1 rep, so he is the starter. But there's enough flexibility, it feels like, in there for them to make some kind of change. I just wonder how long you give it. I just wonder how long you can give it. And that's kind of where I don't know. I don't know, because Kirk, we know he's been stubborn with those starters in the past, but does Cade have like the Jake Rudock 2014 equity, for example, over Beathard? And I'm not, Iowa would be thrilled to have those 2 quality quarterbacks right now. So let's not compare Cade and Rudock right now. Rudock was better. Beathard's better than Sullivan, probably. But comparison-wise, I'm curious what you think. You've seen this as long as I have. the loyalty to that QB1. Ferentz is very reluctant. We saw with Petrus and Padilla. He's very reluctant to make that change, even whenever it is. It just takes him a while. Stanzi Christensen, another great example. I mean, we just go back. It's just not something he does. So how do you think he views this? How do you think Kirk Ferentz views this? Because I have a feeling Tim Lester would be like, okay, we got to move. That'd be my guess.
Yeah.
We got to move. Like, there's not much time here. But how do you feel like Kirk Ferentz, who's the ultimate authority here, how do you think he views this, Scott?
I think in some ways it's great that this is happening in August, that there is some adversity that everybody's got to face, and they figure out how to work on this together. This is the right time for it. You don't want this to happen, say, the week going into Ohio State. You want to be on the same. And that is where he is much more rigid. During the season, it's like, unless somebody, you can't even say unless somebody does whatever, because last year was the unless situation and they didn't do anything with it with Deacon Hill. So I think in this case, I've, seeing the controversies, I know people even want to go back to the Brad Banks, Kyle McKeon. I'm not going to go that far back. But in every other circumstance, he's been reluctant to change, which is good. He's not knee jerk, but he's come to the right decision every time. I mean, like Petrus, I was like, man, you got to do something different. But then when you saw something different, it was like, okay, it validates that we see these guys in practice, because Alex Padilla was not better than Spencer Petrus. And at least Petrus gets the trains running on time, like that. When you look at Rudock Beathard, that one was probably the most difficult because you had two NFL quarterbacks. You had two guys capable of having really good seasons. And Jake was everything you want in a quarterback. He was cerebral. He was tough. He could run. People forget that he had really good runs. He didn't have the arm as much as Beathard did. But I always said CJ Beathard's kind of like Jax Teller from Sons of Anarchy. I mean, he had a swagger that people just really lead, but Jake was everything they wanted. And then going all the way back to Christensen, I mean, he was the linchpin to that recruiting class in 2005, which didn't turn out quite as good as they thought, but he wanted to give him every opportunity, and he saw it slower. But remember, he started Stanzi, and first of all, they traded off the first two games. And then he started Stanzi against Iowa State, and Stanzi was horrible. I mean, and he had to bring Jake in off the bench to beat Iowa State in 2008. The next week they're at Pitt. Stanzi was a little bit better. He decided, he called it a gut feeling, go with Jake the rest of the way. They lose by a point. And then he flipped it over and didn't look back. I think this time, from what I can gather with Kirk, is we were there in West Des Moines in May. And he's like, he's my guy. He's our starter. Last month at Big Ten Media Days, Cade's our starter. Now he's non-committal because he's seen this. He's seen this week of practice. So that shows to me that he is the light is on, that it's not like, he's 69 years old now. This team is built for the now. He's got a new offensive coordinator who's probably coming to him saying, we've got to really analyze this. So I give him this week, Chad. Mm-hmm. I give him this week with the ones, but I give Brendan 1 reps too. Mm-hmm. Saturday is typically their biggest scrimmage.
Yep.
They go through the scrimmage, they review it all. Next week, you make your call as to how you want to stack it. Mm-hmm. And maybe you continue to let them battle it out. But I think you really make that push based on what you see this week and on Saturday.
Oh, man. Wouldn't it be great to get to go to that scrimmage on Saturday? You don't get to write about it. You don't get to write about any schemes, but maybe just, I don't know, kind of like NFL, covering an NFL team where you can relay, hey, this guy looked better than that guy, something like that. That's all. But I know we can't. But
and I'll be a PJ Flex walkthrough on Saturday.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Does he actually walk through anything, or does he run through stuff?
I guess I'll let you know next week when I come back.
Well, Scott, one of the great things about GameDay Men's Health is that you can go into one of their offices in Ankeny, West Des Moines, or North Liberty and check them out for free, no obligation. They can give your life a boost with testosterone replacement therapy in a very safe, methodical way. If you need it, you may not have low T, but you might, especially if you're getting older like Scott and I are. I think we're all getting older in some ways, but but I'm in my 50s now, barely, but I am. And getting, if you do have low T, getting your levels to the point where you have that type of energy, sex drive, muscle mass, like you did in your 20s or early 30s, is it's a great thing. It feels great, and they can help with all aspects of your health, including with weight loss. So, really, no risk in checking them out. Get your free private, no obligation consultation today. They are at GameDayMen'sHealth.com, or like I mentioned, you can go in or call Ankeny, West Des Moines, where I go, or North Liberty, where Scott goes.
It's a great place, Chad. It's really been helpful this summer. Feel much better. So it's given me a boost, and it's not a caffeine related boost like an espresso or anything.
Yeah. No, I mean, I just actually had my annual physical yesterday, and went great. I mean, I would say it went great. I feel about as healthy as I have in a really long time. Like, honestly, I feel awesome. My weight's down, energy's up. Playing decent tennis. Wish I could play a little bit better. I need to work on my serve, but yeah, no, I feel great on the court. So really good. I'm thinking back now to Michigan a couple of years ago when Cade McNamara was the reigning starter. He took them to the playoff. They had J.J. McCarthy in the wings. Not comparing Brendan Sullivan to J.J. McCarthy, but you remember what Jim Harbaugh did, Scott, with their first two games. He gave Cade, I think, the first start. He articulated this before the season. Like, he said, we're giving Cade the first start, but they're going to share reps. We're giving J.J. McCarthy the second start. They're going to share reps. And then we're going to make a decision, whatever. I mean, they had easier preseason games. I know Iowa can't do that with Iowa State. But I'm wondering, week one, could you, I don't want to say articulate it, but maybe you could, say we're going to give both guys reps. Maybe not like the Tax Slayer Bowl where you go on alternating series, and if you score, you keep the ball, which I actually didn't mind. I thought that was I didn't mind that. I mean, it's a bowl game, big whoop. But I don't know, even just thinking ahead, you need to, at some point, get maybe both guys on the field in that first week just to see where things are, because that's the 1 week you can kind of experiment.
Yeah, you could. I will say this, that Illinois State is 20th in FCS, and Brock Spack is their coach, and he was the defensive coordinator for Purdue when they had some great defenses. And they are not going to be a piece of cake. And so you want to get some, and this team needs with a new offense, some sort of chemistry, some sort of rhythm. It may take them the entire game to get into it. If they score 27 points, people will be like, oh, look at this. But you kind of need to get into it a little bit. And the question that I have is, in looking back at some of the other issues, I don't know that I would like the dynamic of that because of the personalities. Now, I think Brendan could handle it. I'm not so sure Cade can. And I'm not saying that he can't be a team first guy, but this is year 6 for him. He's back for football and football only. He came to Iowa to be the starter, to be the man. It wasn't like at Michigan. And of course, J.J. McCarthy's a first-round draft pick and highly celebrated recruit. I don't know if he would be able to handle that. I don't know if he'd handle being number 2 either, but I think, putting that much pressure on possessions, like you got to make the perfect pass, you got to be this, might be a little bit challenging. If I were them, give it this week. They're going to see a lot of reps. They've seen a lot of reps.
Yeah.
Let them both battle. And, and if you're going to take it into next week, do that too. But, and then basically if you're Kirk, you go to Tim. Well, first you poll the coaches. You've seen it on all the sides. Maybe do it privately. Maybe do it first and then do it together collectively. Then go to Tim. What do you think? Who gives us the best chance to win? And then Kirk says, okay, I make the call. This is how I'm going to go. And then stick with that decision. I know it's a hard-headed decision, but I think you've got to do that. I don't know that the team benefits by going into week 1, flipping. I think that has the potential to backfire with this team at this time.
Yeah, that's fair. And I do agree with you that the Brendan 1, Cade 2 dynamic could not be as, I don't know. I could see a negative to that because Cade did not come here to be QB2. Not that Brendan came here to be QB2, but it's like, and then when you hear the guys talk about Cade, like he does bring a presence to that huddle. So there is a consequence to putting him at 2. In terms of chemistry, we don't know exactly what that is, but it does seem like Cade has built a pretty darn good rapport. I mean, I was talking to Mason Richmond on Media Day, and he's like, yeah, it's just like you get that feeling in the huddle with Cade. You get that charisma, you get that, hey, that vibe. And you know what I mean? Like Beathard had that.
Yeah.
A guy that you want to play with, that you want to do well for. So there is a consequence. It's not just it is a bottom line business, but it's not just as easy as, okay, well, he's slightly better, so he's the guy. There is a lot you have to take into account here. So I think I'm with you on you don't want to go into it splitting the reps. But I'm just saying, like, I feel like the dynamic, I'm not advocating for this necessarily, but I feel like the dynamic would work better as like, okay, we're giving Cade, here's your you got the opener, go show us what you can do. And if it's not going well in the first half, sorry, buddy. We got to pull the plug. Like, we got to win this game, and then that's it. But maybe he plays really well. That's the other thing too. And then you've always got Brennan available on the bench. That's where I, kind of like a relief pitcher in baseball. Could Cade be a long middle reliever? I don't know, but could Brendan be? Yeah, I know he can be because we've seen him do it. We've seen him be that guy. So let's talk a little bit about Brendan. Go ahead if you want. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess along those lines with Brendan, but I think the thing is, Brendan knew what was going to happen when he came here. He knew that Iowa had a starter in place. He came here anyway, hoping to compete, to be a good teammate. He's been in this position before. He understands what it is. He's a Northwestern grad, so he's obviously smart. Cade is a situation where he came here to be the starter, and he's been the starter. And I think some of their rhetoric in the summer, Cade, and mentioned, well, we needed a quarterback. I mean, we only had 2 in the room, so that's why we went and got him. And, it was, I won't say it was condescending or anything, but it was just a little bit arrogant. And whereas I felt Brendan kind of had a different vibe to him, like, I understand the deal. I mean, if you see enough progress in Cade this week, if you're Kirk and if you're Tim, and if you feel like, yeah, I think he's making enough progress that we could be good at this, maybe he's got a chance to really grow and take over, and Kirk wants to give him that opportunity for a half. Maybe he doesn't even tell him that. He just internalizes it. The staff decides, all right, we're going to give him the first half and let him see what he can do. And then at halftime, if it's not what we want, then, Brendan, get ready. Then I think that's fair. I also think, though, the dynamic that I like is that Tim does have a clout that Brian didn't have when it comes to this position, which is Tim's played it. He's played at a high level. He's been a head coach. He's been in the Green Bay Packers. He's seen this. He has a vision for his offense, unintruded by Kirk. And I think in this case, if he goes to him and goes, we can't have this, we're not going to be successful, that I think Kirk will listen to him. Whereas with Brian, he'd be like, no, let's just stick with what we got.
Yeah, that's a good point. The Tim Lester dynamic, how much voice does he have here? How much clout, how much does he, I assume he's going to speak up. I mean, he's, from our interviews with him thus far, he seems like he's really sharp. Like, that's one thing I've come away from so far is I feel like Tim Lester is the right hire. Yeah. I love what I'm hearing from him. I love the concepts. I love the run game does look good. We'll hopefully get to that here at some point. But I rewatched, Scott, all the reps from Cade again. I rewatched all the reps from Brandon Sullivan again. The rewatch for me for Cade was actually worse than the live watch. I thought he was dreadful. And there's a scout, one of the scouts I use to help me on DVR Monday sometimes. Like, hey, what am I seeing here? Like, what am I missing? I use he was just like, that was it was unredeeming. I'll see if I can find like that message here. kind of said the wide receivers didn't really do him any favors, tight ends. That didn't help. Obviously, Lachey not being out there was a factor.
Yeah.
But he's like, it's one day, but wow, did McNamara look bad. Mechanics were a mess on anything 10-plus yards downfield. So that's kind of and I agree. I mean, when you rewatch it, that's exactly right. He was okay on the swing passes. Okay, I would say, on those. His longest completion was a screen to Jacob Gill for 10 yards.
Yeah.
He had no other completions longer than 4 yards on 24 attempts, except to Quinn Schulte.
Yeah. 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 If you want to subtract that from the total, then it's like minus 15 or whatever. Yeah.
And that was a bad pick six. Anyway. But Brendan, I wanted to focus on him because it's like, okay, well, if they don't go with Cade, what do they actually have? And when I rewatched Brendan's reps, I was actually a little bit more encouraged. Maybe it's just because the bar was low, but I thought his decisiveness looked crisp. I thought he moved in the pocket quickly, reacted in the pocket naturally. Again, we know there's going to be rust with Cade, but I thought when he checked it down, his check down throw was quick. It was on time. It was accurate. And that's what Brendan Sullivan's stats tell us from Northwestern. He is a highly accurate quarterback. He might not be the long downfield threat, but I don't think Cade's really a big downfield threat at quarterback either, unless he's really set in the pocket. So I came away a little bit more encouraged with Brendan's play than I was even initially. So that's, I don't know if I assume you kind of re-looked at it too, but it just seemed like he had some juice, and we know Brendan can scramble. Now, I would say this for Cade. When he did scramble 2 times, he did look faster than he did last year. So there's a positive for Cade. The mobility looked better. But we know Brendan can run the ball too, and that's the word we've heard on him, athletic. So, to me, I don't think there's any question that he was the better quarterback on Saturday, but he's also not perfect.
No, he's not perfect. But I also, and I'm not trying to advocate for him because I do agree with you. He did go against the 2s, not the 1s, except for he did a series or so where he did against the 1s. And I just want to see more of that. But I saw more accuracy. I saw there were streaks in him where he was, and early on, I think it was the second series, he had, there's one was a breakup, but then, he completed passes to the flat. He had a drop. He had a flick for a play that, was called a sack. He had other bigger plays, but then what I thought was the best part of it for him was that sequence of the 2-minute at the end of practice where he went 5 of 6, went right down the field and looked in command. And he brings that extra dimension. I mean, Cade can run better than, say, Nate Stanley or Spencer Petras for sure. But, he's not necessarily a running quarterback. He can run if needed. But I think Brendan is a legitimate run threat. And when you add in the RPO to this offense, you can also take that advancement to zone read. And that's another element to this offense. And he was accurate in short passes. You want to have swings. You want to have flat passes. You want to have slants. And he's accurate there. And high accuracy, as you said. I mean, he's in this high 60%, which is something Iowa doesn't have very much of. And if he's capable of making the makeables, which we've heard for years, and running for a first down, this offense is, it's different. It's completely different. And so I was impressed with him. Again, considering he came in June, Chad.
That's fair.
Not that Cade had the opportunity to play in the spring, but he was there in every single, he was actually throwing at times, and he's been, I think with Brendan, maybe it's like, okay, I'm getting this. He's got to catch up to everything. But, it's only been 2 months since he's been on campus.
Yeah. And going back to the Tim Lester interview that I did, the one thing he said, he's like, we're not going to be great at everything. My first year, like we just got to, he said the first 10 days of camp, and I put this in my Caleb Johnson article today. He said the first 10 days in camp, we got to figure out what we're good at. And then after that, we got to focus on, those things to win games. So that's the process they're in right now. And if Brendan Sullivan, for example, is better at those quick, short passes, you've got to have those in this Tim Lester offense. You've got to have, you can't have those incompletions where it's an easy 6 yards and you just miss it. You can't have that. You have this Iowa. That's that's the Ferentz for 26 years. That's what you got to have those completions. And that's what was so, I think, frustrating about both the Petrus and Deacon eras is like, you just miss those throws sometimes that are just right there. When they even, unless it's one of the tight end the tight end rollout pass, those are the only ones that are like the easiest completion. Other than that, like it was hard. Like everything was so hard. So that's where I think they're at now is got to figure out what you're good at. So Scott, let's get do you feel like getting into stuff they're good at right now? Since we've kind of, we've kind of talked quarterbacks here for a while. Yeah. Because there's like everything else really does feel good. Like special teams, better than I expected. The defensive back seven, to me, better than like I'm not as worried about the Cooper DeJean loss. I feel really good about John Nestor, TJ Hall, Jamari Harris, and we've seen Deshaun Lee play. That back seven should be fantastic. Y.A. Black, Aaron Graves, love them. We'll see. It seems like they got enough bodies on pass rush. But I think the questions on the offensive side, Scott, were how good is this offensive line? And I came away very encouraged about the offensive line. I've seen some people more mixed on their performance, but just from what I heard from, off to the side, off the record, everything, like they really like what this offensive line's doing. And I saw it in the run game too. And so I think that's something to build on.
This is the best unit on the offensive line. The way they performed against, again, a great defense. Let's not slight their opponent here. And that defense was playing hard too. They weren't just deciding, all right, we're going to, tape our legs together and let them get some good plays here. I mean, they were really, battling and, but the way they ran the ball and the way that Lester mixes it up, it's really good. I really am impressed with the way that Iowa is carrying out its offense. Again, in some ways it's like, oh, wow, it's something different, so therefore it must be good. Well, it does look good. And they were able to run the ball effectively for a lot of the times. And even then, even the plays where they're getting 1 or 2 yards, there was some push. There still was, it looked like an even matchup. Like this was a legitimate Iowa offensive line from, say, 2015, 2016. I mean, I thought Mason Richmond was fantastic. I thought Logan Jones was really good. And I mean, I thought Connor was decent. They're going up against NFL players. I mean, I think at least 3 of the starters are NFL guys, probably NFL draft picks. So I was really encouraged by the running game. And I really liked Kamari Moulton, Chad. I liked the way his burst into the hole. His legs are thicker and stronger, yet he didn't lose a step. And he explodes through it, explodes into contact. And Caleb Johnson, of course, had a really big day. So I was more encouraged by the offensive line than I probably even was discouraged by the quarterback play. But it's quarterback, so we're going to talk quarterback.
Well, yeah, right. And in the Kids Day scrimmage, of course, the passing game is going to be pretty vanilla. But we did see some wrinkles in the run game, Scott. I know you picked up on one thing early. I think it was a jet sweep motion from Weechin and a power handoff to Caleb Johnson. I know you're a big advocate for those types of things. And we saw a really nice toss sweep to the left to Caleb that broke, I think, 15-yard gain maybe. We saw that outside zone, the return to the outside zone. I think Caleb runs that really well when he can. We've seen him do that. For big, long touchdown games. And that's what gains. And that's what the Tim Lester offense is predicated on. Explosive plays out of the run game. It's what he wants. And I think we saw opportunities for that. So maybe the quarterback play doesn't have to be too great if you have a run game like this. So what did you see in the run game in terms of, they're not going to show us everything, but what did you pick up on with the run game that you really liked?
They're able to use motion and not even hand the ball off, but yet they're a contributor on the play. there was one play, I want to say it was Rusty Van Wetsinga, who kind of, again, they're not really running I at all, but we went in motion from right to left. Then he kind of backtracked towards the middle, and then at the snap he headed back to the left and lit up the defensive end. And it was like, okay, motion's just not for ghosts here. It's not just to get people moving and looking and seeing things. There's actually a purpose to it in some of these plays. I saw a sweep, and Iowa hasn't been really good. They haven't really tried sweeps, but there was a way about it. I mean, where you had a lead blocker that went in motion on a sweep to Caleb Johnson, and I believe that was his big one that he broke for about 20 yards, and it was just perfectly executed. And I talked to George before the practice for quite a while, and just he's like, hey, you follow the offensive line, and you know what you're talking about here. You might want to. We're a little different now. We're better. We're a lot better. And so watching it, I'm like, it's one of those units that you look back and you go, this is an Iowa unit. This is an Iowa running game that's comparable. I look at this line and I think it's like 2016, but
I was just going to say that. It's kind of solid, but no stars.
Yeah.
Solid left to right. They won the Joe Moore Award, obviously, but they had two 1,000-yard rushers that year. And maybe they can be a 65-35 running team.
Exactly. They have three. Jazz Patterson runs hard. He's pretty good. Even TJ Washington got in late flipped from wide receiver to running back, and he looked good. And I'm like, they've got a stable of running backs, and that's a good thing for this team because we know historically that's been an issue. But there was also just it felt like there was purpose, like there was confidence, like they knew what they were doing and they were executing the game plan. And again, the defense did a good job too. And that's, there's always this yin and yang when you're dealing with these practices where it's like, hey, a receiver had 2 big plays. Well, that must mean the DB sucks. No, it's just not like that. Or they didn't get any big plays. Well, the defense is great. I think you got to kind of respect both parts, but I think that they look like they have a purpose. And if this means that Chad, 2016 is a bad example because they really did not have a wide receiver core to say
no wide receivers, but they did have a star tight end that year
who got hurt.
But you've got the Lachey Kittle comp, I guess, is pretty good.
Yeah. an ability,
ability. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say I think this offensive line is a little bit better than that 16 one. There's no James Daniels, but I think that there are several draft picks here on this line. I think Mason's a draft pick. I think Connor is. I think Logan Jones could be. I think, Jennings Dunker could be. I can't speak to Bo Stevens. I haven't seen him play. But I think they're, other than 2 years ago, which doesn't really count. Right. So I think I see this unit being like 2016, executing like 2016, and the running game mirroring that with more pieces than what they had that year. So lot to like on that. I'm very, very high on that.
Agreed. We want to thank Scott's taking a sip right now. We want to thank Steeple Ridge for their support. Never a bad time of the day to whip back a shot of Steeple Ridge bourbon. It's a delicious drinking, award-winning craft bourbon. If you don't find Steeple Ridge at your favorite retailer, ask for it by name. Steeple Ridge, distilled, aged, and bottled in Iowa by Lonely Oak Distillery. Thank you for their support of Legends and Listeners. This is it's fun to do this show with you, Scott. I love your insight. What else did you learn from Media Day? Let's see. Let's pick up some highlights. Just kind of grab some highlights. One, Mason Richmond played last year with a broken leg. Found that out.
Yeah, talk about that. Yeah, that's amazing.
He got hurt the week of the Purdue game. I think, a lot of us were kind of hearing buzz like Richmond's not going to play this week. He got hurt in practice, and then he went out there and played that week in practice. And they actually they had a backwards pass they were throwing to him that week. That would have been wouldn't that have been something? And that's how low the offense had sunk. They were throwing to a lineman with a broken leg. And it was gonna work. It was gonna work. That was one of the best play calls of last year that just never came to fruition. But anyway, so he and I had kind of heard Richmond's just not healthy. Like he's playing through, he's gutting it out. And he had the same injury as Cooper DeJean, a fracture in his leg, different part of the leg. Cooper's was lower, so he couldn't return. And it's a different position. You can't. But he gutted it. He basically played on one leg. And George Barnett, when George Barnett on a radio show a couple months ago said, yeah, Richmond was playing on one leg last season. Like, I was like, okay, I got to ask Mason about this. And I was like, are you going to finally, I said, it's on, I think Jack Leto has the video. So you're going to finally tell us what that injury was? And he goes, which one? I was like, the big one. Like the one there, like where you were playing on one leg. And he goes, fractured lower leg. I was like, what? I was like laughing. I was like, I'm sorry to laugh, but you didn't miss a game, dude. And so I guess my takeaway, just to circle back to the O-line, is like 1 through 5, left to right, they were fully healthy this week. Richmond, Stevens, Jones, Colby, Dunker. Jones and Dunker were out in spring. So to see those 5 together, that's a big deal. That was one thing I kind of learned on media day that also gave me more encouragement, honestly, about the O-line, because they were between Jones, Stevens, Richmond, all hurt last year. Of course, Dunker gets hurt against Nebraska, right?
Yeah.
Didn't play in the Big Ten title game. I think Colby might have been the healthiest guy last year, and he was dinged for a little while there at one point. So, and Rusty Feth played with like one arm. So
yeah, right.
So, yeah, you kind of have to take all that into account. You got to stay healthy, Scott. But that's the other reason I'm bullish on the line right now is they're healthy. What else did you learn? Anything else? What did you pick up on media day?
Yeah, well, first, when it comes, I talked to Mason and I just started asking him about something offensively. And he goes, well, I should be asking you. You're the expert. And I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah, that's what somebody told me yesterday, that you know more about offensive line than anybody else. And I'm like, I have no clue compared to you guys. I'm a novice at best. And he's like, no, not compared to us, just compared to other people. I'm like, I don't even know what to say here, Mason, but he's always good he's just funny, and he always flips it on certain things. And he absolutely, like almost all offensive linemen I've ever dealt with, absolutely hates talking about their injuries. Just hates it. We're all hurt, but that's all offensive linemen. And I tell you what, if you had to go through what they did, we wouldn't go to the office, and that includes if your office is at home. I mean, it's just that they deal with. It's like today, let's wake up and get hit by a sledgehammer in the shoulder, and then by the way, let's just shoot it up, and then let's go play a football game. I came away very intrigued by when I talked to Tyler Barnes for a long time. He's now the new general manager for Iowa football. He's in charge of kind of personnel across the board. It's a position that they needed to have because everything's going into a different orbit next year. We've talked about it with the House case. I mean, they're going to have, we don't know how much money, but they're going to have money to play with from the school. They've got to figure out, how do they allocate these scholarships? 105. Is it going to be in a full 105 scholarships, or is it going to be some partials? How are they going to figure out, they still are loyal to that walk-on philosophy of, they want to, they'd hate to lose a guy like a Quinn Schulte, because they overlooked him, but then they also want to use their scholarships. And then he's got to be in charge of that personnel, from the transfer portal to exits to, recruiting and all of those other things. I mean, it's going to be, it's quite an undertaking, as we know, and he kind of described it all for me. I was really intrigued by what I heard from him, and then kind of on a comic relief note, I would say is I wanted to get YA Black to talk about this story I'm finishing on the Iowa defense. It runs Thursday. It's kind of holistic, and Seth Wallace and I talked for about a couple hours a few months ago, and it comes out Thursday. And I wanted to get him and his perspective. And I wanted to get, so I look and he's not there. And so I asked Matt Weitzel, the SID, I'm like, do you know where YA? And he's like, yeah, he's inside. He's hiding. You can go talk to him if you want. And as soon as I walk in, I'm like, sorry, YA, I just have a couple questions. First thing was an ultra loud expletive. And I'm like, I can't quite tell if he's being serious or he's just kind of joking around. But as always, he's very studious, and you've got to have your P's and Q's right when you're talking to YA Black, because if you ask it in a leading or stupid way, he's going to make you feel like it. So,
yeah.
he suffers no fools at all. He's smart. He's really smart. In fact, one of the smartest players I think he dealt with, but if you ask a dumb question, you're not going to get a dumb response. You're going to get a look at you like you're dumb. And that's like the one. I know that's like the thing I wanted to avoid the most was you
ask an intelligent question.
Yeah. Except you didn't have to say it. He just looks at you and you're like, I'm right.
I am doing a story at some point before the season on the D tackles, and because Graves and Black, I think are. What do you think are one of the most unique pairings Iowa's ever had in terms of physical freaks on the inside? They usually have like one guy that's like bigger, like God, now I'm
like a Jaleel Johnson.
Yeah. Or Carl Davis and Louis Trinket-Passat. Like it's kind of like a odd couple type thing. Logan Lee, Noah Shannon. I mean, there's usually like one of those like Nathan Budgeta type guys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But this year they've got like two like men, like JJ Watts, like in the middle of and they could be really good. But anyway, just to finish that point, I was talking to Kelvin about YA Black, because it's better to talk to him about YA than YA himself, because he's not going to say anything. And he's like, one thing people don't understand about YA is he's so smart, like what you just said, to the point where he'll turn around to Jay Higgins and say, "Are you sure about that?" When Jay's making a call. So that's it just gives you a lot of comfort about the way he plays the game. And I've said this before, but I'd like to say it again. Everyone talks about Higgins coming back, Schulte coming back, Castro coming back, Lachey coming back. One of the biggest decisions to come back that nobody knew about was YA Black, because he had a decision to make as well, and he came back for his 5th year, and that is massive for this team, massive. And he had 2 batted balls of Cade in the Kids' Day practice. I thought he looked the best on the D line, in my opinion, what I saw. So great. He's going to be a great player. He's just got to stay healthy.
Yeah, for sure. He's had dings along the way, but again, just about everybody does. That was a major focus to my defense, was the 2 gap and why it works and what they try to do and how unique it is. And you look at that tandem in particular, they could ruin an offense and not have a single statistic. I mean, the way that they pressure up the middle in the passing game, they could force bad passes and knockdowns. And it's like, okay, well, he had a pass, he had 2 tackles and 1 pass breakup. Oh, how good is he? Well, he took up 2 blockers every single time he was in there. They ran for 28 yards on 20 carries. It's because those 2 did their job. So Jay Higgins can have 16 tackles.
Right.
And you're right. Every single year up to now ish, almost every year you have the Carl Davis, the Jaleel Johnson, the monster. And then you have next to him kind of the walk, either walk on or they're real tryhards. Nathan Budgeta, Sam Brinks, Noah Shannon kind of fit in that category because he's,
little guy.
Yeah. 6 foot, 290, 5'11", 290 probably. But, but he's so self-aware. It's like, and this is where the magic happens, is like with Kelvin. Kelvin is so real with them. He'll be point blank with Noah. He's like, you're not going to win these matchups unless you are perfect in your fundamentals. And he became probably the best technician they ever had. Noah Shannon did. And it was great. Fantastic. In fact, to watch him compete on Sunday on NFL Network against the Vikings, and he had a tackle, I think, and, played a lot of the 4th quarter, but just to see him get that opportunity was great. And, but I think this tandem, it has the potential to be as good as they've ever had at that position. And that's saying a hell of a lot. They've had some great ones over the years.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going. If those 2 stay healthy, I think they can eat a lot of snaps. I talked to Aaron Graves about that, who was playing roughly 20 to 25 snaps a game last year. He's like, I know I might be up to 70 this year. That's the reality. I think they can take it. Logan Lee did it. You don't want it. But Pittman sounds like, from talking to KB, Pittman sounds like he's in the Army, so to speak. I think he's in that rotation. I thought Jeff Bowie flashed a little bit, heard his name a little bit on media day as well. A guy that's just hasn't been healthy, but maybe could be that guy. D end, I feel. I mean, I thought Max Llewellyn just looks like he's a player. That's the name Seth kind of breadcrumbed. We didn't have the Phil breadcrumbs, but it sounded like Llewellyn had taken a jump. I didn't, Brian Allen didn't have the kids' day he had last year. Kelvin had a funny quote about, remember that Cam Wilson and Siakam Massaquoi kids' day? Yeah. And he kind of paused for effect, like, yeah, they didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, right.
So let's see Brian Allen do it consistently, So I thought Kenneth Merriweather flashed. Heard Caden Crawford's name. So they've got options there at D end. I don't think we're going to see a true freshman like we maybe speculated. I think they feel good about somebody emerging from those 6 defensive ends with experience. So I don't think this is the time for Joseph Anderson or one of those guys just yet. Which is good. That's encouraging. You don't want really to have to throw those guys out there. Same with the linebackers. Maybe we'll see them on special teams, but they don't need them right now.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect spot for him is get them on special teams, Cam Buffington and Derek Wisecup and let them go out there and compete, get them on the field, have them make some hits and then next year make it a full-fledged competition for that job, because you're going to lose, all of your guys and maybe they're just backups next year, but then the year after they're 2-year starters type of thing. But I like what you said about the defensive line. Kelvin said that they have pretty much 7 guys in place that they think that are there. The 8.
Do you think Brian Allen's one of those 7?
Yeah, he is.
Okay.
It's Brian Allen and Max Llewellyn and Jeremiah Pittman. Pittman being number 5. Llewellyn
they can live with 7 if they had to.
But he also was like, look, we've got the 2 walk-ons, Will Hubert and Luke Gaffney, Jeff Bowie. I expect them to get some snaps. One of them is going to eat up a little bit of some snaps. And if Kenny Merriweather or Caden Crawford can prove to get on the field, then that's helpful too. So if they're, if the offense can do what it needs to do, especially at the quarterback position, Chad, then they can get those younger guys on the field in 2 of the first 3 games and put themselves in a position to where now they've got a rotation. They're great on the back end. And then they can start lining up and slugging it out in the Big Ten.
Full circle there, Scott. I mean, we really feel good about just about every position. We didn't get to see Lachey in the 11-on-11. Obviously, feel good about tight ends. The one position I think I don't feel like I learned much about, and we can finish here with Media Day Kids Day, was wide receiver. We just hear a lot of names. Seems like it's kind of up and down every day. Who's who, what's what. The 3 starters were Caleb Brown, Caden Weechin, and Jacob Gill. That was the one name that Lester brought up is like, wow, this guy's he's a professional. He works hard. I heard from someone else he's a great blocker, which, of course, Iowa loves. It's honestly, we scoff at it, or we don't, but like you may scoff at it, but that's a big deal, especially if they're trying to get this run game going. If you get a good downfield block from Jacob Gill, toss sweep, that might go 70 yards instead of 8, So anyway, receiver. How are you feeling there? Oh, Brevin Dahl switched to receiver, by the way. I talked to him for about 5 minutes. So he's a receiver now, at least for the time being, just with how loaded they are at running back. So receiver,
wow.
where are you at on that?
I think it's a work in progress. I think it's going to take I think it may take the first month. They've got 4 games, 2 rivalry games, then a bye. I think that's probably, you might see 8 or 9 guys get snaps just to try to figure out what they want to do there. I mean, Caleb Brown's not going to be there for the opener. He's going to be the starter. Seth Anderson wasn't out there on Saturday. He was there, but he wasn't out there. I expect him to be part of this. I expect Caden Weechin to be a part of it. Jacob Gill, as you said, I think it was Mason, who was like, I love that guy because he's just really aggressive. So if he's blocking and looks good, he's going to be in the rotation. Then it's up to, what's next. Jarrett Bowie, I think he looked okay.
Reese Vanderzee.
He was out there. So
that was surprising.
Yeah, to see a freshman. And it's like, I think they're just trying to see what everybody can do and then start cutting it down later on. So I was encouraged, but basically the quarterback play prevented me from really providing any kind of strong opinion about that position.
Yeah, you're right. It's hard to tell. Great show, Scott, man. That was a lot of fun to talk about. I feel like we were talking some real talk on the QBs, but that's kind of the idea of the Media Day, Kids Day doubleheader. Is you get so much information, you need to process it all. And I feel like we got a good read on this team. Yeah. Everything's in place except for the quarterback right now. Receiver, we'll see, but that's what they got to figure out between now and August 31st. The BTN show is in town Friday, so you guys will want to tune in Friday. And maybe that'll be a really interesting show this year, Scott. What do they learn about the quarterback situation? What do they say about the quarterback situation? I feel like those guys. I know Revson won't be there this week, but those guys they'll give you the straight talk. They're gonna say, "Hey, Brendan, Cade looked good today," or whatever. I'm real interested to hear, something on Friday from BTN guys too, because that'll give us a little bit of a progress report, I think, on where their decision is at.
Yeah, for sure. You finally get a kind of a gauge on some of the things, and they're good at a lot of it. Some of it is sunshine and rainbows, and with some of the other teams, especially, and you're like, okay, tell me really what's going on here. But with Iowa, it's usually they practice with good tempo. They know how to run a practice and blah blah blah. Okay,
right.
Heard that since 2007, but then. Yeah, the quarterback is going to be really what we're interested in hearing, and I think the most simple thing is for them when they decide is who can make the makeables, and who they feel like can go out there and do what they need to do to advance drives the best. Now, of course, don't have mistakes, but that's unwritten rule. But I think that's got to be your North Star on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Scott, next week is our last off-season episode of Legends and Listeners. Then it's game week, so it's coming fast here. Appreciate your insight today. That was a lot of fun, buddy.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Chad. It's good to talk to you again here, and live.
Good to be live. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Good to be alive.
Good to be alive. Yeah. The bean screen. So.
Yeah. All right. For Scott Dochterman, this is Chad Leistikow. We will be back with you next week on Legends and Listeners, as always, from the Channel Seed Studios and only on the Iowa Everywhere Network.